Hi, Cypress, you said hello.
So who are we talking to? Come a little closer. We got some things to tell you.
Welcome to the Cream Base Bus. I'm Daniela.
And I'm Jalen.
This is our puppy Cypress. And for the past 2 years, we've been traveling in this school bus.
And today we're going to talk about boondocking in Florida.
If you're a traveler already, you might know that people tend to stay away from boondocking on the East Coast.
It's true. Out west, there's so much BLM and open land that you really don't even have to think about it. As much time as we've spent on the West Coast, we're actually done with it. We've seen enough prickly stuff and enough dusty deserts and enough beautiful sunrises and sunsets in the desert that it was time for us to come back to the East Coast.
I'm not sure if we're biased to the climate here because Jayla and I were both raised on the East Coast, but at this point, we are looking to feel closer to home and to hopefully get some property of our own. And we know that's going to be here on the East Coast, and that's why we've come back this way. But anyways, winters are cold, and just about everywhere you can think of is cold besides Baja, which is amazing. If you haven't done it, go boondock in Baja for sure.
Definitely.
And Florida, which is something we haven't explored before, and we've heard a lot of mixed reviews about.
We've had a lot of struggle with deciding if Florida was right for us and right for just the type of way that we live, like on the road, lots of boondocking, not
Van
a lot
life.
of RV parks. But this year we decided to make the trip because we were in New York and we were in Asheville, North Carolina, and our pipes were freezing and we just could not do it anymore. It
We
was
spent
time.
3 months in the snow and we were just ready to be warm.
Now going down, we knew where we were starting off and we knew we wanted to visit some family along the way. So we wanted to do the entire East Coast and then come back up the peninsula and stay in St. Pete for some time, find work in the city and stay there until it got too hot to stay any longer.
For those of you who might not know what the term boondocking means, it means camping not at a formal campground. So you're not connected to water hookup, you're not connected to solar, you are just out in the wild, camping, usually on a street, on some public lands, anywhere that's not an established campground. And that's how we've done most of our traveling for the past 2.5 years is through boondocking. You know, we set up our bus with all the capabilities we could need. We've got 100 gallons of fresh water. We've got 2,000 watts of solar, everything we need so that we don't really have to go to the campgrounds. We don't need to pay to stay and use the amenities of something else.
And I think it kind of comes with the territory, right? You have pride in the fact that you've built something that can actually withstand not being plugged into
Self-sustainable.
all the time. Yeah. It feels good to do that. And so it does feel kind of like hurting the chest a little when you're like, well, I guess we'll go to an RV park. Our first stop was in Hilliard, which is just north of Jacksonville, Florida. We were lucky enough to stay on our friend Joel's blueberry farm. And it was actually just that, just absolutely wonderful and peaceful. And
there was a pond where Cypress could play in and the water, which he absolutely loved. We picked fresh eggs from the chickens every morning.
But that's about the extent of us being able to just like boondock willy-nilly.
Our first boondocking experience was in St. Augustine, and that's where we got our very first nighttime knock in our past 2.5 years on the road.
If it was going to happen anywhere, it was going to happen on the East Coast.
Now, if you don't know what getting the knock is, that's when a security guard or police officer comes up to your rig and tells you that you can't stay there for the night. And it typically happens in the late hours when you're either already asleep, usually when you're already asleep, or when you're about to go to bed, or when you wake up. So I think we had already gone to sleep, it was maybe midnight, and we got the knock and we're told that we had to leave, which was really surprising because when we pulled up, the spot was filled, the whole street really had 4 or 5 different rigs between RVs and vans.
There was no sign saying otherwise, no overnight, no big rigs, no anything. So we thought for sure we were scot clear.
It was 1 block away from the beach, which was amazing, and they kicked everybody out of there. So we headed to a truck stop and we wound up spending a couple nights there, leaving during the day and then going back at night just so we could explore around St. Augustine.
Yeah, I think getting our first knock really hit us kind of hard, and knowing that like we might just not be safe parking anywhere is kind of how we felt for a while. So
And we were tired. We had just ridden off of driving all the way from California to New York, a lot of pipes freezing, a lot of struggles with the cold. We were going through some financial hardships, and we were just already exhausted that we didn't want to push the envelope any further. at that point.
Yep. So we were tiptoeing on eggshells,
We were
trying
playing it
to
safe.
make sure that we were all right. So yeah, truck stops, rest areas tended to do pretty well for us for a while, but that also meant that you're back on the move every day and every other day, just to make sure that you're not getting noticed, so to speak.
Or overstaying your welcome.
And now that might be easier for some people that are doing stealth camping or stealth boondocking, that are in a van that doesn't have solar on the roof, and or a box truck that doesn't look like people are living in it. And so it might be easier for different rigs, but a full-size school bus with pink, brown, and green stripes going
There's
down the
only
side.
so much stealth you can really be.
Right.
Typically, it's not hard to find boondocking, and this goes for all over the East Coast for one night. One night, maybe pushing it with 2 nights.
Yeah, fill it out. Okay, yeah, we could stay here one more night.
Yeah, in general, it's not that difficult, but we were a little bit on edge with Florida, just given that first night we got that knock for the first time ever, and it was just gonna be a one-night stay.
Yeah, it was totally jarring. It was like, oh God, are we gonna be good at all through all of Florida? And so that's what we're here to talk about. It's like, how was it for the rest of our time? And like, what did we do to make it work and things like that. So that's why we're here today.
I have to say, we kind of steered away from finding our own little boondocking spots for a lot of this trip just because we wanted the security of knowing we could get through a night of sleep. Typically, if there is an empty parking lot or a boat ramp or
ramps,
a trailhead,
trailheads.
Those are really good, really solid spots and have gotten us through a lot of the East Coast in general. On our way to Everglades National Park and in the Everglades itself were a lot more boondocking options.
Yeah, there's a lot of small creeks and swampy areas where there's plenty of pull-offs around the national park area where you could definitely stay for a couple nights if you wanted to. If you're thinking about making your way from the east side to the west side of Florida, those will definitely be your saver at night.
And we are boondocking and it's hard to find a spot, or we're just traveling and we want to get to the next place the next day. Our best options have always been Walmart and Cracker Barrel, and those are our go-tos. But Florida has been the first state that we've actually found Walmarts and Cracker Barrel shutting down the availability of overnight parking. And that is largely due to, there's a new state ordinance in Florida
as of October of 2024
that only allows you to sleep in your vehicle for 3 hours, and that applies to truck drivers as well.
Truck drivers, RVs, and even just your regular Honda Accord. There's no longer a ability of just sleeping in your car.
So whether or not that's enforced is really done at the local level, either by the establishment or the local police in that area. However, there are signs posted almost everywhere in Florida, even the Cracker Barrels that we stayed at and were okay with us staying there, that said no overnight camping.
Yes, I guess there's a liability on their end as well, that if, you know, people are not abiding by the law at their establishment, that they might be liable for that as well, and that's completely understandable. But we did end up staying at a few Walmarts and Cracker Barrels along the way. Definitely makes it a lot easier.
Along with Walmart and Cracker Barrel, Planet Fitness are also a great option that we use all over the country. Again, Florida has the restrictions, so you don't know what you're gonna get at certain locations, but a Planet Fitness is a great one-night stop as well.
Big point that I wanted to make is that if you are going to stay at places like Walmart and Cracker Barrel, to please just stay for one night. They do still have to run a business there, and a lot of people we've seen along the way have really abused these Cracker Barrels. They get out all their stuff,
if you're gonna stay for
hang
more
out.
than one night, leave during the day and come back at night, and leave in the morning, you know, when the business is opening. We were at a Cracker Barrel where the manager was very upset because people in the parking lot had been there for over a month and they had not left at all. And so I understood his frustration completely.
Yeah, he was ready to call the cops, and you can't blame him. He's got a business to run.
Now, when we made it down to the Keys, we did wind up staying at a couple state parks down there. We didn't attempt any boondocking, and the RV park prices were absolutely insane.
Yes, some of the RV parks looking upwards of $250 a night, which is actually crazy because people are coming with their own homes.
Yeah.
So to think that they're, even if they just need power and water,
just the real estate for the night.
Just the real estate alone, $250 a night.
Yeah, we stayed at Curry Hammock State Park, which was absolutely beautiful and very secluded feeling. You had a lot of nature surrounding you. There were a limited number of spots. It felt very much like a state park more than an RV park, which we love.
Yeah, and that's really all you want too. Like, you want to be around the wilderness, you want to be involved in all the birds and the fish out flopping around and stuff. So going into a state park is definitely your best bet when visiting the Keys.
And those came out to almost $60 a night.
Yes, so $60 a night in almost the exact same, but like across the street from RV parks that are probably 100 to 200 a night. It definitely felt really good. And like she said, more secluded. There was maybe 20 spots available. I will mention that if you're looking to do this exact same thing, you can set up your email to get notifications when people cancel their night stays at any of the state parks, which is wonderful for dropping in quick in the morning and saying, oh, we can stay here for 2 days, go.
And that's something that we were a little bit worried about because Jalen and I are not great planners, and we have heard that spots fill up. Although we weren't really intending to stay at campgrounds, that even state parks stay up, very far in advance. I think Florida residents can reserve up to 10 months in advance. So they're beating you out a lot of times and things are really full. But that website that Jalen was talking about was Wandering Labs. And that was really why we were able to even find any nights in the Keys, especially last minute.
I mean, we were there for a couple of days and then we were like, oh, another night opened up, pop in. And so, yeah, it was really nice to be able to just like grab another spot and stay a couple of days or so.
The other state park that we stayed at was John Pennekamp, and it had some cool areas where you could paddleboard through the mangroves, and the park itself was really huge, but the state park campground was very on top of each other and it felt more like an RV park. So if you have the option of Curry Hammock or John Pennekamp, I would definitely recommend going to Curry Hammock. And then there's also Bahia Honda, which is out by Key West more, and we weren't able to find a spot in that one, but I've heard really wonderful things.
There are apps available that can help make this more of a breeze. There is Harvest Hosts and a couple others out there. We actually got Harvest Hosts going down to Florida because we thought it would help us out a ton with our stays. But the way that we travel doesn't really allow us to stay just for one night a lot of times because of our work schedule.
Or it's not ideal for us, and if we're gonna stay for one night, we'll just pop through to Cracker Barrel or Walmart rather than if we're gonna be somewhere beautiful, we would like to stay for, an extra day because we do work during the daytime, and that limits our hours. There was a really great winery and homestead that let you stay, and that was through Harvest Host, but you could also stay there without Harvest Host. They had a huge open field. There was live music on the weekends. It was a really fun place.
And that was staying right outside of Miami. So if your goal
about an hour.
If your goal is to stay around that area, I would definitely suggest checking out this winery.
Overall, I would like to say that Florida had the most amount of cops that we have ever seen in any of the states we've traveled.
The most police state I've ever seen.
And it's the only place in the past 2.5 years that we've been kicked out of a spot during the daytime, not even to stay overnight. There were 2 occasions where we were kicked out of our spot during the day. One was on the beach, just on a side street, no signs, free parking for everybody, right next to the ocean. And they came by and they said that we could only be taking up 1 space.
And we take up 2.
We take up 2.
Literally exactly 2 spaces.
And then another time we went to a dog park for Cyprus, and
also
we just planned to stay. We planned to stay there the whole day, just hang out. It was a pretty small parking lot, but 4 cop cars showed up.
It was at least 4. I mean, they just kept coming.
Yes, and they came, they told us that we were taking up too many spaces and we had to leave, which, I understand because it was a smaller lot, but it was a little bit frustrating to be kicked out of places, not only at night, but also during the day. Yes.
Those types of situations will have you ready to just leave a state altogether and be like, never mind, we'll just do another one.
We didn't, and we actually loved Florida. The water was beautiful. We found the St. Pete area was our absolute favorite.
Yep, absolutely. When we got to St. Pete, we crossed over the Skyway Bridge that's on the south side of town, and we looked over to the left on a fishing pier, and we found at least 8 other schoolies along with tons of other campers, tents, everything
RVs,
just on the fishing pier. And when we saw that, we kind of knew it was our saving grace at that point. We were like, oh, we might be able to stay in St. Pete for a while.
And we did.
Yeah.
and we did. And that was a really awesome spot for us to just reset and rejuvenate.
Yeah.
And
it's crazy what you can get done on the road when you're not moving your rig. And that's exactly what we did while we were at the fishing pier in St. Pete, is get to work on everything. We did tours with other companies, with our schoolie. You can check out our schoolie tour on our page. We'll link that up at the top. as well as getting in some renovation projects, doing some brand work. I went into town and did some DoorDash. So it really just gave the accessibility of living in a home on the side of the ocean, literally on the coast. And we were able to just live, which felt really, really good. And we stayed in St. Pete for a month and a half. I would say the west side and the peninsula, you'll actually get way less policing. It went from seeing at least 10 cops a day on the East Coast to seeing like one a day maybe on the west side. So all in all, yes, we did have to move around a little bit more, but we know that going into it, and you should too. If you're thinking about boondocking in Florida, get ready to see some really beautiful sights, but be ready to move on the next day.
And it's not impossible. You just have to be okay with moving around.
It's gonna be beautiful. You'll see a lot of great stuff, maybe some manatees and some gators, lots of awesome birds, cranes, herons, things like that, but you'll be moving around quite a bit.
Let us know if you have any questions about boondocking in Florida. We wound up spending 2 or 3 months down there exploring around and then finally landing in St. Pete and spending some time there. We can only speak to our experience of early 2025 being in Florida. I'm not sure what sort of regulations might change. Maybe they'll get more lax on their restrictions, honestly. But if you have any questions, let us know. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more content about traveling full time.
Yeah, and be sure to check out both of these videos.
What are those videos?
I don't know. They're just gonna pop up and you're gonna watch them.
Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you on the next one.
See you later, guys.